Fall is in the air, the temperatures are cooling, the leaves are turning, it's baking season. A few years ago, I endeavored to make a sweet potato pie. I was inspired by a lady. She had such exuberance when she spoke about this pie. She said it was far superior to a pumpkin pie. And so I made it. One of the things I did different than her was I took the sweet potatoes and instead of boiling them and peeling them, I took and put them in my Kamado grill and I baked them. Then the skins just fell right out. All the nutrients were baked inside. Made a huge difference. The other thing I did is instead of adding cinnamon, I added ginger, just a little bit. And it gave it just this nicest little snap. The next year I made some changes and it didn't turn out as well. So I'm back to square one. One of the real downfalls was I didn't write down the recipe that first year. And so I'm going to have to do that. And then I'm going to have to follow the instructions. It's really important, and I'm learning this with baking, is a small change in the ingredients and how you put it together makes a big change on how it tastes. And I'm learning that. That's really what we find here in this morning's devotional. The title is Why Cain's Offering Was Rejected. The scriptures are very brief in these opening scriptures of how God created everything. And what we see when you open up Genesis chapter 4 is that Cain and Abel are born, and then we find that Cain was a tiller of the land and Abel had herds. But when they brought their sacrifice, Abel brought his sacrifice from the firstlings of the flock, and then Cain brought his from his labors from the field. We see that Cain's was rejected. And interesting is as this unfolds, and you see that the scriptures say in the King James that God had no respect to his offering, he became wroth. He was very, very upset. And God came to him right away, and he asked him, "Why art thou wroth? And why hast thou countenance fall?" And he says, if you would have done the right thing, don't you realize that things would have turned out better? So apparently we see that there must have been some instruction. If you go back to chapter 3, you see that in verse 21, that God clothed Adam and Eve with the skins of the animals. So there was the shedding of blood right there. No doubt they taught that picture to their children. But Cain decided not to do it. He was going to do his own thing. Now, this is not just about we need to follow instructions. While that may be true, the reason is because this was a picture that was being set up right now at the very beginning of Jesus Christ. We know that the Word of God says that he was the lamb slain before the foundation of the earth. So this picture had already been established. And what was happening is Cain marred that picture by his disobedience. Interesting, it was disobedience that got us into the problem. And this disobedience continued the problem. This disobedience ended up in the death of the one that had done the right thing, Abel. So, if you see that this was a picture that needed to be followed, and that Abel's life really was picturing Jesus Christ and that sacrifice that Jesus would make, we need to ask the question, does our life picture Jesus Christ? Are we showing a sacrifice to people? You see, this is why following the Word of God is so important. Because not all of us fully understand every facet of the Word of God. And sometimes there is just trusting God and listening to his voice, and then the revelation comes later on and we begin to understand it. Remember Moses? He struck the rock once and got water. The next time he was to speak to the rock. His anger overtook him and he struck the rock, and God said, "You can't go to the promised land." Because we understand that Jesus was that rock. We read that to Paul's letter to those in Corinth. And he was only struck once for all, according to Hebrews. And so when we look at the Word of God, let us be obedient unto the Word of God that we might picture Jesus Christ. Can you hold on to that? Fall's coming. Baking season's coming. But we also know the Lord's coming too. May God bless you.